And here we go. So thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate your time, value your time. My name is Drew McElligott, and Brad Rademacher can't join us tonight. He's our referee administrator. I am helping out on the referee side these days. I myself am a certified U.S. soccer referee. Grassroots referee is the type of certification that I have. But I'm also, for the first time this year, I'll be refereeing some high school games as well, which is really weird because I used to be a coach. But in any case, I want to let you know that because there are many directions that we can go in as whether we're a youth referee or a volunteer adult referee beyond just AYSO. And I'm just learning some of that myself, but I can certainly help you out if you have questions. If, for example, you'd like to get paid to referee in travel games, or if you'd like to get paid to referee in high school games. One of the points I just want to make sure everyone knows is that if this is something that interests you, whether you're a high schooler or a 12-year-old or a grown adult, is that there's some place to go beyond AYSO. But obviously, most of this conversation will be about the upcoming season and refereeing in AYSO. We are all volunteer referees in AYSO, and that includes our youth referees. We are incentivizing kids 12 years to 17 years old to work games within AYSO. We want to make sure they get trained, and we will be incentivizing them not by cash, but by earning credits towards gift cards. We'll be doing gift cards currently with movie theater discount cards for LaGrange Theater, but we'll also be doing other types of gift cards for other establishments and places. If anyone would like to get involved in helping us administer that, the Youth Ref program, then we could certainly use the help. So I'm just plugging that briefly. This is just an informational flyer that hopefully you all can see on the screen right now that covers the bullet points about being a youth referee. We also have a webpage, ayso300.org/youthref. The training that we are providing youth referees is the same training that we're providing our adult volunteers. That's both an online version of training in addition to in-person training. And I'm going to just move on from the youth referee for the moment. But again, if you have specific questions, we'll be happy to address those at the end of this presentation. eTrain U is our online training for both coach, referee, and also AYSO board member training. This is created and administered by AYSO as a national organization. It's free to access and use, but we do need you to be a registered volunteer within your family profile at our team website, which is ayso300team.org. So you can only get access to our online training if you've checked the box in your family profile as a volunteer referee or volunteer coach. If you have a child that would like to be a youth referee, the one step we need you to take, and this is on the Youth Ref webpage, is adding your child to, if you haven't already, to your family profile, not as a player, but as a volunteer. So the same place where the adults in the family are listed in your family profile, we'll need you to select the button that says Add New User, and then you'll add your son or daughter as a volunteer. You'll then have to check the box for referee, and then at that point, we will give them access to the online training. One big difference between a youth referee and adult referee volunteer is that the youth referees do not have to go through, they won't go through any sort of background check. All of our adult referee and adult coaches must submit a background check application each year. And if you have any questions about that, as in terms of the background check process, I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end of the presentation. But youth referees, We do need you registered in our system in the family profile as a referee volunteer. It will list them as a youth referee because it will recognize their birth date, but we do not have to get them background checked. Also, another web page. We're obviously sending you to too many web pages, so for that I apologize. But at ayso300.org/referees, or if you just go to the AYSO public website, there'll be a referee header on the home page. You will see a link on that referees page to our current the current in-person referee training that we have scheduled right now. Our next training sessions will be tomorrow, Thursday, at the LaGrange Library. We have a 5 to 6 o'clock session, which is strictly for refereeing in the U5 through U8 divisions. That's commiserate to the complexity or simplicity, really, of refereeing at this age. We only need you for an hour. We do have some important things to talk about for an hour, but it's not quite as intricate when we get into the type of fouls that we're calling, the rules of play at U5 through U8 versus the next session tomorrow from 6 to 8 o'clock, which is our regional referee training intended for referees doing games at the U9 and above level. If you want to go to the 5 to 6 for U5 through U8, and you want to hang around for the next one, feel free. But these are all for the different, these are two different types of in-person training. Ideally, we're asking referees to complete the online training first before attending. But if you don't do the online yet, feel free to come by. The more the merrier. We'd love to see you. Briefly, and this is more for our parents on the call that are not currently referee volunteers, but perhaps considering becoming a volunteer referee. We want to ask the question, what if there is no ref on Saturdays? Typically, what happens when there's no ref, the coach sometimes will fill in, whether it's the head coach or the assistant coach. And in either case, that's less than ideal. We have specific responsibilities as a head coach, as assistant coach, that we'd like to fulfill. We'd rather not take the coach away from this whole enterprise of coaching kids and guiding kids during the game. And so that's not the answer. Coaches being referees, and that's coming from someone who's been in that position before. We could get a spectator parent to fill in as a referee. That's another option. We could get the coach's son or daughter, whether they're 12 years old or not, whether they're trained or not. We could throw them into the fire refereeing a game. Seems pretty harmless maybe to some. Or we could just not even have a referee. At U5, U6, you could make the argument that we don't need a referee at that age. I think there's some other considerations, but these are the scenarios if we don't have someone to cover the game to run the game as a referee at any age level. And if there is no ref, who's going to keep time in terms of duration of the quarters, the games? We have everyone plays as one of our 6 philosophies. We do quarter breaks, U5 through U8. Who's going to make sure that we have those quarter breaks, that we take the time for the coaches to substitute their players? Who's going to keep the game fair? Who's going to be calling fouls, age appropriate to whatever division is playing? Who's going to, when we're at U9 and above, who's going to control, manage, organize substitutions during the game? Who's going to keep the game safe? If there's extremely physical play, if there's unfair physical play, who's going to call those fouls? Who's going to make sure that there's not dangerous play that could create injury, which certainly happens in the game of soccer, especially at the older ages? Who's going to watch out for the physical hazards? Kids pushing other kids into metal goals, holes, potholes in our perfectly seeded and maintained fields. Who's going to make sure that the goals are properly anchored and at least pre-game inspect the goals to make sure there aren't any hazards, ideally. If there's a sign of lightning or thunder, who's going to make sure that the game is suspended immediately, which is what our lightning and thunder policy is. So not to belabor this too harshly, but the bottom line is that we don't have enough referees to cover all the games that we play on Saturdays. And we're not looking for 100% perfection, at least not overnight. But we want to move the needle. We want to ideally make some improvements here. That's what these sort of outreach Zooms are for. That's why I hope at least some of you have shown some interest in potentially refereeing for us. Doesn't have to be tomorrow, maybe next season down the road. But the real point is, we have had, as a league, we have a very large league, a lot of games played on Saturdays. And I would say more often than not, if there's any type of disagreement, argument, incident at the field, more times than not, you can connect the dots and draw a pretty clear line to the fact that at the start of that match, whatever happened between the start and the finish happened, but at the start of the match, a very common commonality happens time after time after time again. And that's that at the beginning of the match, there was no trained referee. And we're seeing that more and more, that the consequences of not having that match run by a trained referee is that things can get out of hand, things can get unsafe, ugly. It doesn't happen every game, but we're going to have these types of incidents, disagreements among coaches, if there's no credible person trained to referee that match. And so I say, what could possibly go wrong without a referee? Okay. So that's a big driver for our outreach tonight, and what we're trying to improve. The youth referee program is certainly part of that, to have more hands-on in terms of not just calling a game as a center referee, but also assistant refs. ARs are helping manage the game from the sidelines in terms of out-of-bound calls and offside. As you all know, I think we're an all-volunteer organization. I'm not paid, you're not paid. Our United coaches, they're the only members of our organization that are paid professionals. We're trying to keep this soccer experience a positive one. I think we largely do a good job at that. We're not perfect, but we're trying to keep every part of our experience, practices and games, safe, fun, and fair. Referees do have a meaningful impact, and that's regardless of whether you are refereeing every single match of the season. One of the things I want to demystify is that if you're a referee volunteer, we're not truly expecting you to referee every single match. You may end up doing that, but that's not our expectation. Our hope is, over time, we can have enough referees so that we can assign each team within a division a single referee. That way, we're not relying on the same referee for the same team to always be the one to provide a referee. One other thing that we get asked a lot that I want to demystify is, we will never assign you as a referee, as a parent referee, to someone else's team. We're only assigning you to your son or your daughter's team. If you want to work other games, especially for some added experience, feel free. We have a self-scheduler. When you are signed up as a referee with our league, you will have access to see all of our games. And if you have time, if you want to do it, you could schedule yourself for your son's game, but also another game at the same field, let's say, immediately after that match. So there's that flexibility, but we certainly don't expect you to do any other games other than your son or daughter's match. We need you and the kids need you. We all need to work together to keep this a safe, fun, and fair environment. And I really appreciate even the existing refs that are on this call taking the time to hear me on this, even though a lot of you already know this from being referees for years. This is, of course, the visual aid that should tell us all that this is not just Drew or a board or a short list of people that are creating the environment and ultimately leading to the outcome of whatever the AYSO experience is for teams and kids. We all have to play this role, a role in making this happen. The referees, the coaches, and the parents on the sideline. It's got to be focused on the kids, of course. That's the only reason why we're doing all this, or should be, for the kids, not for the parents. And we need to work together. Just as we ask our kids on the field to work together as a team, the adults need to do the same thing. We've got to work together. No one person can do it alone. And of course, briefly, I just need to talk about the 6 philosophies. Those are the secret ingredients, not so secret really, the ingredients for making sure that the kids have a positive soccer experience. So as we get into conversations about, most especially things like the background check, things like what requirements there are for completing both online and in-person training as either a coach or a referee, I'm throwing another web page at you, ayso300.org/volunteers, and that lists and organizes what responsibilities, what requirements, I should say, we have for being a parent, volunteer, and really, parent, volunteer, coach, or referee. We absolutely are focused on making sure that all of our volunteers complete the background check. All of our parent volunteers are completing that process. If you have any issues with that, you can email CVPA, that's CV as in Victor, PA at AYSO300.org, and he will help you get whatever troubleshooting you need in terms of completing the background check process. We have online training required that is not soccer oriented. That's called Safe Haven. CVPA is Child Volunteer Protection Advocate. And as part of the CVPA requirements, Safe Haven, Safe Sport are requirements to complete online. And then you'll see on that page the other requirements as well. And I told you about the referees page. I mentioned the difference between the U8 referee training, both online and in person for the younger ages, the regional referee for U9 and above. When it comes to both for existing and new referees, when it comes to the rules of play for each individual division, because they do vary, we have what we call division guidelines. And at the public website, ayso300.org, there'll be a division guidelines link on the right side of the page that will list everything from the correct age-appropriate ball size for a given division. It will, for example, talk about substitutions and many, many other rules when it comes to the specific division that you're interested in. There is a progression of these rules and certain things that are allowed at certain age, certain things that are not. And something like the build outline, which I'm not going to go into detail here. That's a lot of this information is on the website. That starts at U7, as do goalkeepers. Despite the slide here, it says U9s. Goalkeepers start at U7. So the real point of this slide is just to make sure folks know that there are changes. And one of the changes that we've actually put into effect for this season that's different from last season is at U5 and U6, when the ball goes out of bounds across the sideline or the touch line, that's not a throw-in, but a pass-in. That's what we were doing in the past few years, pass-in at U5, U6. It's a pass to a player's teammates. There's a 2-yard buffer between the child kicking the ball and any other player. We need to give them space so that they can successfully make a pass. Starting at U7, and this is what's different from last year, is starting at 7, players will be throwing the ball in when the ball goes out of bounds. That, again, is different, and that's an example of a change or a progression of rules of play between U6 and on to U7. Any questions about the division guidelines, we can always talk about at the end of the presentation. But again, that's where you'd find it on the public website. So briefly, our weather policy, I mentioned it before. When lightning or thunder is heard, play is suspended immediately. In terms of referees' uniform, for those of you that are existing referees, we'll be sending an email over the weekend to only certain referees that have worked certain numbers of games. Now, how do we know how many games they worked? And this is, I should say, from last year. We only know how many games you worked if you're an experienced referee based on, in our system, when you self-scheduled. So if you're not self-scheduling, we would have no idea how many games you worked last year. But for those referees that worked a certain number of games last year, we'll be contacting you about picking up a new referee shirt, which will be green. And so most of our referees have yellow shirts. That's the sort of, call it the base package. That's baseline. When you first start out, you're going to get a yellow referee shirt. For the experienced ones that have worked enough games, you will get a new green one. If green's not your color, that's perfectly fine. You can wear yellow. But we are trying to sort of add a little perk for our most experienced referees. Hopefully, you understand we're just trying to show you that we appreciate you. Other referee gear that new referees will pick up will be whistles, lanyards for the whistles. Only the older ages, U9 and above, will hand out flags. But we have shorts, we have the shirt, socks, and we have 2 pickup dates for next week. September 6th from 5 to 8 p.m. And September 8th. And that'll be at the Spring Rock Park Shed. If you have any questions, we can talk about that after this in terms of referee uniform. Back to our youth referees, it's important that our adult referees self-schedule themselves for a host of reasons. But the biggest reason of all for me is I want to make sure that our youth referees are looking at the self-scheduler, seeing what open games are available, meaning games without a referee, and then they can go to the field and not find an adult referee already there. In other words, if you're showing up to the field and you haven't self-scheduled yourself, now we run the risk of 2 referees being at the field at once. And for U9 and above games, that's a good thing. We want more than 1 referee, ideally. We want 3 referees, 2 to run the sidelines, and 1 is a center ref. But for our U5 through U8 games, which are perfect training grounds for our youth referees to just run by themselves as a center ref, it's that simple, really. It's kind of a waste. It's very inefficient to have 2 referees at those matches. And when we're trying to encourage youth refs to work games, try to give them experience, trying to mentor them where we can in this whole process, it's kind of a downer to show up and there's already a ref at the field. So that's the most important reason I'd encourage adult referees to make sure that they self-schedule themselves. And we understand things happen, but please try to do that. Again, we talked about youth refs. I'm not going to, we'll talk about more at the end of the presentation if anyone has any specific questions. And we're pretty much almost at the end of the presentation. A common theme or mantra for us with AYSO is to let the kids play. And what that really means more than anything is limiting interruption, limiting disruption, limiting distraction. Adults being adults and maintaining focus on that triangle that we saw earlier with the referees, the coaches, the parents on the sideline, focusing on one thing, and that's the kids, making sure it's a good experience for them. We as adults can be very encouraging and positive and create a great experience for the kids. Sometimes we as adults can also make it a less than positive, unpleasant distracting, disrupting experience. And that's what we're looking to avoid. So before we get into questions, questions. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing the screen, and we'll open up things up to questions. And obviously, I've talked about a lot of different things. Some of you are experienced refs, some are new, some are not yet signed up as a ref. Some of you are youth refs or youth ref parents. So, as orderly a fashion as possible, if you could please unmute yourself if you have a question. By the way, it's 8:31. That's not too bad. Any questions?
I had a question on how we were with striping volunteers.
Okay.
Last year, we had a few fields that weren't really getting striped, which made refereeing a little bit more difficult.
Of course.
Just kind of curious to see how we're going to do that this year, or where we're at this year.
Yeah, so what I would say is, to be honest with you, there aren't any major changes in terms of how we do that. The volunteers that we rely on for coaching and refereeing are no different than the volunteers we rely on for striping our fields. I think that we have a self-scheduling system for that, and certainly we're always open to suggestions. Probably the most obvious suggestion is if a volunteer doesn't do the job that they signed up for, then we shouldn't be using that volunteer again. So I think that's a sensible suggestion that we can act on. But short of that, we rely on volunteers. There may be a field that 1 week it does not get striped. Basically we're tracing with paint the old fields.
Yeah, I mean, selfishly, I mean, if I have to go out there on Friday to stripe it, so I can, help everybody on that field on Saturday, I would do it. I don't necessarily want to do it, but
right.
If something
nor should
short,
you have to, right? I mean, I'm just saying, if someone signed up to do it, you shouldn't have to. Nor should I, right? Nor should whoever. I mean, so just to be clear, I totally agree with you that it has to get done. I personally think we set a high bar in terms of trying to make sure it gets done weekly and signing volunteers up to do it weekly. And again, for referees, I'm just saying this is not the answer, Brian, just to be clear, but it is a good idea. If you need discs like cones from us, we'll be happy to give referees discs. That doesn't solve it completely, but it's better than nothing in terms of making up whatever faded line is there. But Brian, the answer is we need volunteers to do the job that they signed up to do. And if anyone has any other creative suggestions, then I'd be happy to make a note of it and suggest it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I realize, getting people to do it is hard. If there was a way for me to chip into, if I had to stripe extra fields or something, I'll reluctantly try to do it.
Yeah, I appreciate. Well, let me just add one thing that I do think is critical. And this isn't to suggest, Brian, that you've never done this at all, but sometimes we may learn that someone's not doing a job that they were supposed to do. And that goes for coaching, refereeing, striping fields. We don't learn about that sometimes until it's too late, or until it's like 4 weeks into the season, if not at the end of the season. So I guess the one thing I would just say is if you are frequently refereeing at the same field and you're seeing this pattern that it's not getting done, and I think most referees will do this, but in case you're not, please make sure you let us know. fields@ayso300.org is the best place to email us if a field has any type of hazard, goals that aren't properly anchored, or fields that aren't getting regularly striped. Brian, thanks for the. Thank you, Brian. Any other questions? What did I not answer for you, or whatever you thought this Zoom would be? what was it that you were looking for that we didn't go over, if anything?
I'm already a certified referee. Do I already have to go through all of the training that you have?
Awesome question. Thank you, Nick. If you are a certified, meaning grassroots referee, you do not have to go through any of the training. That basically supersedes the AYSO training. You do have to be, and this may already be the case for you, Nick, but you do have to be added to your family's profile. And you are going to be asked to self-schedule yourself. And if you have any issues, please definitely email. I would actually ask you to email both youthref@ayso300.org and ref@ayso300.org to make sure that we address whatever issues you have. One thing I want to tell our youth refs that are on the Zoom, or any parents of youth refs on the Zoom, it has been unfortunately a slow roll, if you will. It's taken us time to get this off the ground, the youth ref program. But I am fully committed. We could use more volunteers, frankly, fully committed to administering it, just so it's not too much work for too few people. But we will make improvements, and we have improvements we need to make in terms of making sure that folks like Nick are getting what they need, whether it be troubleshooting tech issues in terms of getting in the system, or the incentivizing with the gift cards. So thanks, Nick. Great question. Any other questions? Anyone else with comments that they'd like to share with the group or share with me, or add to anything that we've talked about? Okay. All right. So just to recap, AYSO300.org /youthref for youth ref information, AYSO300.org/referees to view the in-person training. If you have any sort of tech issues and you're not getting what you need yet, you can, email the youth ref at AYSO300.org email. I'm monitoring that email address, and maybe, I don't know, 2 or 5 other email addresses. Just kidding. But email me there and I'll help you if I can, or pass it on to someone who can help you. Okay. So I want to thank you for your time. I'll stick around for a few minutes after signing off in case you guys have any other questions. But appreciate you taking the time. I hope it was productive, at least for some of you. I hope you all have a great season, and I hope you enjoy watching your kids play soccer. Thank you. Good night.